Good evening, everyone. Good to see you tonight. Welcome to the fourth and final session in our series, Stronger Together, Loving Your Spouse in a Chronic Illness. I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm sure we'll have some people who are jumping online as we are getting started here, and maybe even a little bit later as we're moving into this time. If you're joining with us tonight, it'd be great if you just kind of made a comment there in the comment section to say hi. And I'm glad to see Wayne and Kathy and Lori. Thank you guys for being here tonight. And if you have not downloaded the handout for tonight yet, you might want to try and do that and print it out. However, if you don't have time to do that, don't worry about it. We'll be going along. You can take some handwritten notes. Plus, this is going to be recorded and it'll be live immediately after we finish tonight. The recording will be live and you'll be able to watch it and catch anything that you missed, perhaps. Hi, Judy. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us here tonight. It's going to be, this has been a great series, I think. I've enjoyed doing these 4 sessions, and we're coming now to the end. I'm going to take a summer break from doing these online sessions. At least that's my plan for now. But we'll be back in the fall with some more relationship building material, and we'll keep in touch. And who knows, I may decide to do something during the summer, or maybe just a one-time, kind of see how things are going during the summer months. But Stronger Together is something that started about 11 years ago. Cindy and I had the opportunity to think about and pray about how we might be able to minister to couples who are dealing with a chronic illness. She had a chronic illness, which many of you who are joining here tonight are aware of that. She dealt with multiple sclerosis for about 27 years before she passed away on February 19th of 2018. And we were able to minister to a number of couples, a lot of couples in seminars and retreats, and also just doing some coaching couple to couple in helping couples deal with the unique pressures, the unique situations that come to a marriage dealing with a chronic illness. And so we started Stronger Together. That was the name of the marriage initiative. And I'm continuing to do it. Originally, it was part of Family Builders Ministries, which I was the founder and president of that organization for 30 years. But when I retired and passed on the leadership of that, the Stronger Together part, the Stronger Together Marriage Initiative, became a part of our local church, Grace Community Church in Rochester, New Hampshire. And I'm continuing to provide opportunities for equipping and helping couples who are dealing with a chronic illness in their marriage. So that's part of why I'm doing what I'm doing here tonight. This, as I said, is the 4th, and it is our final session tonight in a series that we've been dealing with. The first session, June 9th, How to Thrive in a Chronic Illness Marriage. And then on June 16th, with Dr. Cynthia Fantasia, Courage and Hope in the Shadow of Alzheimer's, which I think was really a super interview and presentation that we were able to present on this very unique situation that many people find themselves in. And then last week, Facing the Challenges of a Chronic Illness Marriage with Mike and Donna Bassett from North Carolina, who are navigating the challenges of Donna's cancer diagnosis over 7 years ago. All 3 of the previous seminars are available at my website, williebatson.com. The same place where you can download the handouts. They're available there. They're in their entirety. And if you missed one or you want to recommend to someone who is dealing with a chronic illness in their marriage, you can go there. And the one for tonight, 3 Things You Must Do, will be there as well. So that's what we're doing tonight. Let me just share with you again, anyone who's joining us who's not familiar with my wife of 45 and a half years. As I mentioned earlier, she passed away in 2018. And this was taken in Bermuda at one of our one of the trips we took to a beautiful place called Willowbank, a Christian resort where I was the pastor in residence for several years. And but Cindy dealt with, as I said, dealt with a progressive style of chronic of a multiple sclerosis. And the last probably 6 or 7 years that she was alive, she was not able to walk. She had to use a wheelchair and was eventually able to get this power wheelchair, which really gave her a lot of independence. It also meant that I wasn't pushing her anymore, and I was also not having to transfer her as frequently, especially once we were able to get a handicap accessible minivan. But there was a lot of independence from that. And this is one of my favorite pictures. I show these 3 pictures each week in these sessions. These are kind of my favorites. So, oh, Lori, you're here. Lori and Hank, good to see you guys. And anyone else that has joined us, if you say hi in the comment section, that'll be fine. If you prefer to just be out there without anybody knowing that you're here, that's fine also. I'm just glad that you have joined us. So tonight, we're going to look at 3 things that you must do in a chronic illness marriage. And I have very often considered this, what I'm going to share tonight, a very basic survival guide for a chronic illness marriage. It's there are things that we should be doing. And in these previous 3 sessions, I have talked about a number of things that can be included, a number of things that can help you in building a stronger marriage together. But tonight I want to deal with probably, as I said, the basics, kind of getting to those basics. So the three things, if you're living with a chronic illness and your marriage is suffering, you probably are very ready to start trying to improve it. Or, maybe things are going well in your marriage, but this can be good preventative maintenance kinds of things. As I said, we've already talked about several things in this series that we should be doing, but here are 3 things tonight that you must do right away. And if anyone's watching this who perhaps has just been diagnosed with a chronic illness, I think this particular session will probably be of the greatest value to you right now. While some of what I'm going to be sharing, or maybe all of what I'm going to share here tonight, would be quite obvious at first, they're worth spending some time on. When you do these things, when you implement them over time, they kind of add up to a sense of accomplishment, and they'll help you feel like you're doing the work required to build a strong and healthy marriage. And as I said, I like to think of it as a survival guide for a chronic illness marriage. So let's get started. Let's dive into the 3 things that you must do. If you have your handout, at the top of that handout, there's a verse from the Bible, from Ecclesiastes chapter 4. And if you feel comfortable, how about reading it out loud with me if you have that handout with you? If you don't, that's fine. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 and 10. 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. This is the passage of the Bible that we have based our Stronger Together ministry on. 2 people are better than one. You're able to help each other. You're stronger together. And so let's look at 3 things that you must do. The first one is communicate. Communicating may seem rather obvious. As I said earlier, these things may seem obvious at first, but we need to be reminded of them. But let me ask you a question. It's there on the slide. Are you communicating about the chronic illness itself and how it impacts your relationship? And really, are you communicating in a healthy way? Now, you can communicate in negative ways about the chronic illness and how it's affecting your relationship. But tonight, I hope to encourage you and maybe give you some assistance in being able to communicate with each other in a positive way. But let's think about a question first. Let's think about this question. What are some reasons a couple might not bring this up? Okay, and how about you guys out there that are watching? How about you just jotting in the comment section maybe one thing that might keep a couple from bringing up the chronic illness and how it impacts their relationship. Okay, so I will wait just a little bit to see what you're putting in there. It also gives me an opportunity just to take a sip of my juice. Okay, Lori, scared. Thank you. Yes, that happens to be that happens to be one that is very frequently mentioned. Scared to talk about it. Really, probably, as I think about that fear and being scared about it is maybe behind that is a fear of what the other, what your spouse is going to say, or maybe you're scared about, how emotional you might get, because when you're dealing with a chronic illness, depending on what it is, it does affect your emotions. And Lori Joy, you don't know. You talk about not knowing how to talk about it. Yeah, I think that's not knowing how, and maybe not knowing when to bring it up either. And then again, Lori Joy, you say denial. Yep, denial, not wanting to talk about it. And Judy, anxious. Yeah, yep, anxious about it. You guys are really good. You've hit several of them that I was going to mention. For instance, denial, and you don't want to talk about it. If you don't acknowledge your illness, or you don't acknowledge the illness of your spouse, then it's not a problem. I don't think you have to talk about it all the time. I'll tell you, I think sometimes we may talk too much about it, or at least maybe not around your spouse, but maybe around other people. But I'm speaking primarily in the marriage relationship. Not wanting to talk about it it's a denial, like, okay, this is really not a problem. This is not something we're dealing with. So if we don't talk about it, it kind of goes away. I think another, or at least there are three emotions here that can keep you from not bringing this up, and that would be shame. You're ashamed of maybe some failures now that you have this chronic illness. You're not able to fulfill your roles, or your spouse is not able to fulfill their roles. There's some embarrassment, depending again on what the chronic illness is and how it might be affecting you, either emotionally or mentally or even physically. And then guilt. Maybe I know that Cindy dealt a little bit with some. I don't think she dealt so much with shame. I know there were some times there was embarrassment because of some of the things that happened, especially when she would be in the hospital, or when there would just be some times when we might have to excuse ourselves from people, and she would be embarrassed about that. Guilt. She expressed some guilt from time to time about. She felt guilty about me having to help her as much as I did, especially in the last 4 or 5 years that she was alive. There was more that I was having to do, and she felt guilty about it. And I felt guilty at times for not maybe being as kind or as loving or as understanding. And, so these can be reasons that can keep you from talking about the chronic illness itself and how it impacts your relationship. Another one that I've thought of is there's not much, some people think, why keep talking about it? Why keep bringing it up? There's not much you can do about it anyway. In other words, it's here. This is the way it is. Why do we need to talk about it? I suppose some of us are more talkative than others, and it's a way of processing it. But I think it's important for us to communicate and learn how to do that. I want to introduce you to a couple. I don't have them here live with me tonight, but they are on video. And if you watched my first session in this series, then I had a video with them talking about how David's chronic illness has affected their marriage relationship. And so tonight I want to show you a portion of a video where they talk about communication in their marriage. David, at the time that this was recorded, I believe it was like 8 or 9 years, maybe closer to 10 years that they had been married, and he had a chronic illness prior to their getting married. So she knew about the illness. So let's watch this. Hopefully it's going to come through for everybody. You may have to make some adjustments on your sound, but let's see. Here we go.
Well, just the fact that communication is paramount in our relationship, and it's something that is even more so a necessity because of my illness. And if we have to keep an open line of communication, she has to tell me how she's feeling, and I have to tell her how I'm feeling. And because my feeling is a lot of times I might be in pain. I might be fatigued or have a cloudy mind or what have you. And it's important that I communicate that to her, and it's important for her to communicate how she's feeling. I might not necessarily be in a diminished state, and might be just sitting around, and she might take that as he's in pain, he's not able to do something, and I might just be perfectly fine, and she needs to tell me how she's feeling, so that if that quality time might happen, we can go to the beach, and I might have that ability to do that. And if she doesn't communicate that's what she wants to do, then I'll miss out on that opportunity to serve her. Go ahead.
And another thing with communication that has been really important to us. I mean, we do try, if something comes up, we try to address it as soon as we can, depending on how David's feeling. The other thing is that sometimes when David's having a bad day, when he's not feeling well, when his capacities are diminished, he may say something to me that comes across as being very harsh. And I'm a sensitive person, unfortunately, and so I take it personally. And one thing that we have learned to do is when he says something and my initial feeling is hurt, is to try not to let that sink in, but just to ask for some clarification, because I'm finding out that oftentimes he didn't mean it the way it came out. It was just the only way he could get it out. So it's been really important for us to talk things through and to make sure that I understand what he's saying, what his heart is behind it. And I'm not a perfect communicator, so he needs clarification on what I'm trying to say too. But that has helped, I think, to really reduce the level of misunderstanding in our relationship and reduce the level of hurt. And probably the other thing that has really helped gets us through on a daily basis is just our relationship with the Lord is just, we can't do it without him. I know we both at times individually and as a couple have called out to him for help, and he does. He loves us, he cares about us, and he there's so many promises in Scripture that we can cling to. I the verse goes right out of my head. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eyes upon you. And that verse has given me a lot of hope that God he sees, he knows, he is going to instruct and teach, and his eye is upon us. And just the comfort that is. So, those are probably two of the biggest ways that we have been able to kind of navigate through these challenging waters at times.
Plus, we have a rule in place that it's generally me because I'm the one making most of the mistakes. But if I say something that I really don't mean, and I realize how I said it, and we have a take back rule. I can say I need a take back, and she is obligated to forgive me. And the same with her, that if she says something, then I'm obligated to forgive her. And it's just kind of a neat way of going through life and not having things set on your mind and work turmoil in your inner being. It's just you can just forget about that ever happened.
Yeah, and to realize that sometimes you do say things at the moment you really don't mean what you say.
Right.
And so it's a way of acknowledging I did not mean to say that, and to just we've just kind of let it go, and we pick back up where we were and move on. So that's kind of a more fun way to to deal with it. So.
I think that's great. Boy, I really like that take back rule that they talked about there at the end, to recognize that maybe in the stressors, dealing with a chronic illness, with the pressures, maybe there's medical issues, medical appointments, there's energy level that's not the way it should be or you want it to be. And we all, whether we have a chronic illness or not, we all say things that we don't really mean in the heat of the moment. There are times we do say things we do mean, but when you realize that, I think their take back rule is really great. It's a forgiveness kind of thing, which is fantastic, has great biblical value there. So I hope you picked up some ideas, from them. And once this is over tonight, like I said, the recording is going to be on my website. It'll stay on Facebook and YouTube as well. And you'll be able to go back and maybe listen to them, pick up some more pointers in terms of how they have learned to deal with some of these communication challenges with David's chronic illness. But I want to offer 3 questions that you might be able to implement in your marriage relationship to help you talk about the chronic illness and how it is impacting your relationship. If you have your handout, you will see those 3 questions that are there. I'd like to just kind of go through them each. All right, where did that go? All right, there it is. So the first question is, what one thing could I do differently or believe differently that would make the greatest impact on you when it comes to whatever the chronic illness is? So if you're the spouse with the chronic illness, you could ask this question or answer it from your perspective in terms of what's one thing that you could do differently or believe differently that would make the greatest impact on you and on your marriage. This is a pretty broad question, so really anything goes here as you talk about it. Examples include start asking for what you need. Maybe it's going to be stop believing that you're a burden. Maybe it's going to be setting some boundaries around your illness and not letting it roll over or spill into your marriage relationship and your daily life so much as you can control. Maybe what you'll do is to work on being more positive, because it's easy to become negative, whether you're the spouse with the illness or not. Maybe you might even say to your spouse, let me try even if I fail. There can be a tendency for you to control, or for your spouse to control the situation too much. The goal here, and this is very important, the goal is to be as honest and non-defensive as you can while attempting to make a significant shift in an area that's been troubling for both of you. Now, I want to back up just a little bit and give something of a warning that these questions, these three questions, they're going to be most helpful when you're in a good place emotionally and physically, of course. And you sit down and you have plenty of time and you take turns answering the question. All right. So you don't want to be in a mad rush. You don't want to be feeling awful and terrible physically. You want to be in a good place so you can have a healthy conversation. So this is the first question. What one thing could I do differently or believe differently that would make the greatest impact when it comes to the chronic illness? The second question, how has our marriage mood been affected by the chronic illness? Has it become more or less optimistic, warm, affectionate, and playful, or is it more angry, sad, depressed, hopeless, and helpless? And this question is really asking, how has your marriage mood been affected by the chronic illness? But there's a secondary question here. What can we do to improve it? Okay? After you've answered how your marriage mood has been affected, then to say, well, what can we do to improve it? I think it's important to take your marital temperature on a regular basis. Regular check-ins make it easier to shift things in a positive direction rather than dealing with them months and even years later, or dealing with months and even years of resentment. If you find the marriage mood has become dark and depressing, then it's time to take some positive action. To do nothing and yet hoping that things will get better is neither a solution nor a plan. So it may be that, some other things that I'm going to suggest here tonight in the other two things you must do might be helpful here. But this may also be a time when you need to perhaps sit down with a spiritual counselor, somebody that can just kind of pray with you and help you, somebody that, would be willing to listen to you and you can trust them as you share what's going on. So, second question that can get you started in communicating about your chronic illness and how it's impacting your relationship is to just talk about how your marriage mood has been affected by the chronic illness and what can you do to improve it. Third question, what is the next big transition or stage in our marriage and how will we incorporate the chronic illness? Now, all marriages go through transitions or stages when big life decisions must be made. I don't know everybody's situation out there who's watching and listening, but these transitions can include being newly married, deciding whether or not to have children, parenting, focusing on careers, midlife changes of various kinds, becoming empty nesters, and even retirement. And chronic illness will affect each of these transitions in significant ways. So as you think about the next big transition, maybe the last transition you didn't handle so well, but now you can be thinking about, okay, what is the next big transition or stage in our marriage, and how are we going to incorporate the chronic illness into that? Now, couples that incorporate chronic illness into their transitions in a hopeful and realistic manner stand the best chance for a satisfying marriage. I had to make this decision. It's probably been now 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. I'm losing track of the time. But I made the decision to retire earlier than I was planning to. And as I thought about it, as I was looking towards the future and looking towards transitioning of ministry, I was taking into account Cindy's progressive multiple sclerosis and how she was spending more time in the hospital. She was not able to travel with me as much. And so I was beginning to think about, we going to handle this next big transition and incorporate the chronic illness into it as well? And that had some limitations. It also meant that I needed to cut back in areas so that I could give Cindy more care, and also so that we would have more time together, although I didn't realize it would be as short as it was, but to make the most of the time. So as you're out there thinking about it, what is this next big transition or stage in your marriage, and how are you going to incorporate it? Now, you don't have to ask all three of these questions. One is probably going to maybe be more relevant for you right now, but I really think this is a good starting point for you. It's a place where you can begin to communicate about the chronic illness itself and how it impacts your relationship. All right, let's move on to number 2, which I'm hoping that I can get finished here and we can have some questions and conversation. The second thing that you must do is to view my problem as our problem. All right? View my problem as our problem. Facing and dealing with chronic illness has never been limited to just the partner with the chronic illness. In fact, a few years ago, I came across this where in some literature that I was reading, they were talking about couples that were married, and one had a chronic illness, and they referred to the spouse with the chronic illness as the affected spouse, and the spouse without the chronic illness as the unaffected spouse. So Cindy would have been the affected spouse, and I was the unaffected spouse. And when I read that, I went, wait, no way. I'm affected. She's affected. Chronic illness always affects both parties in a marriage. It's going to affect you differently, but it does affect both parties in a marriage. If living with illness is defined as the ill partner's problem, then all interactions quickly become unbalanced, unequal, and unhealthy. Seeing chronic illness as a relationship issue shared by both spouses requires a shift in thinking for some people. And if you're ready to shift your perspective from my problem to our problem, let me give you some suggestions. All right? Here we go. Number 1, change your vocabulary. Use the words we and our when talking about the illness. And as you do that, notice your level of connectedness and how emotional intimacy grows. Very often, excuse me, very often when I would talk to people about Cindy having MS, I would say, we have MS, or we've got to go to our doctor's appointment. So just more of that we and us, which is really what marriage is all about, right? So you may need to change your vocabulary. Second thing, educate yourself on the chronic illness. Nothing shows care and concern more than when the well spouse takes the time to educate him or herself on all aspects of the illness. This was one of the things that I did on a regular basis, reading whatever I could, and just digesting and talking to other people as well. And Cindy did a lot of reading also, and she just really enjoyed going to any kind of seminar, anything that would help her learn more about the MS, especially I would say probably in the last 10 years that she was alive, because the MS was having a greater impact on her life in those last 10, 12 years. But it really helps to unify you if you have the same knowledge base. Thirdly, practice empathy. It's never easy having a chronic illness. It's also not easy being the spouse of someone with a chronic illness. Try to put yourself in the other person's shoes and see things from their perspective. Just remember you're a team. It's really important to keep that in mind. That whole idea of practicing empathy, it goes a long way to help you. Get over your pride. Okay? People who have a difficult time asking for help or being vulnerable risk alienating other people. Both husband and wife, both spouses need to work through any feelings of guilt, shame, or resentment around the illness so that walls of self-protection do not develop. Self-protection is not all bad, but what happens in a bad way is that we build these walls of self-protection where we will not let anybody in, we will not share what's going on because we've got pride. We don't want to bother people, and we don't want to be vulnerable or weak. And so if you want to have a stronger marriage together in a chronic illness, you need to get over your pride. This was something that we dealt with, Cindy, especially in the early years when I needed some help with household things. Our children were still at home. I was still working. They were going to school. And we had a woman in our church who came to me and she said, Pastor, I want to help you out. I want to help Cindy out. I clean people's houses. I want to come and clean your house as my gift, as my service to the Lord. And I was going like, amen, fantastic, bring it on. I go home and I tell Cindy about it, and she says, no way, I'm not having anybody else come in here, clean my house. That was not the first time that we had to take some time to work through some of those issues. I tried to understand, I tried to practice empathy, but we had a conversation and, we went a couple of weeks working on it, and finally she did agree to that. And from that point on, maybe not so much from that point on, but even in later years, she was fine with somebody else coming in and doing that. It's just one example of where pride can stop you from really being able to, I think, get the help that you need also. And then be patient with each other. That's a given, isn't it? You probably have heard it many times, but living with chronic illness is both a journey and a process. And if arguments or flare-ups happen, you need to extend loads of grace towards each other. It's the take-back rule that David and Charlotte were talking about. Just remember, we are all works in progress and no one is perfect. All right? So that's the second must thing, the second thing you must do. Communicate and then view my problem as our problem. It's our problem, it's our relationship, it's our marriage. And the third must do, okay, let me get it up here, and that is to maintain healthy boundaries. A big risk for chronic illness couples is that their marriage will become completely identified with the chronic illness. There's little joy individually or as a couple, and life feels exceptionally burdensome when the chronic illness just takes over your entire life. No matter how severe the illness, you need to put some boundaries around it in order to experience any sense of normalcy, even a new normal. And there are some simple things that you can do to keep the illness in place and grow in intimacy with one another. Let me share those with you. All right. First off, develop designated times for self-care, caregiving, or discussing the illness, and other times solely for fun activities and discussions not pertaining to the illness. All right? This division of time, this division of activities and discussions allows you to have a sense of mastery over the illness. You're not letting it control you. You're not letting it control your marriage. You're not letting it control all of your time. You're taking some mastery over it. It also enforces the conviction that you stand united against the encroachments of the disease as you do this together. So there should be times for self-care, times for caregiving, and times for discussing the illness. And then, just plan it and interject it as you're able to, fun activities and discussions that have nothing to do with the illness. Secondly, designate certain areas of your home to be off limits for illness-related conversations. Think about that. You know, again, if all of your conversations revolve around the impact of the chronic illness, then there's no room for anything else, and it can be overwhelming and it can be discouraging to your marriage relationship. So, one example that I read about from some people who have gone through this. A good example would be not discussing illness in the bedroom in order to preserve romance and physical intimacy for that special area. I even say that sort of thing to couples who are not dealing with a chronic illness. There are some things you shouldn't talk about in your bedroom, although I know for some people it might be the only place in their house where they have privacy. But, you know, your bedroom is a place where you rest. It's a place where you renew. It's a place of intimacy. And so it should, maybe one of the things that you might do is declare that to be off limits. And maybe it's another room in the house. You know, if you're sitting out on your deck on these fine summer days, maybe that's a place where you say, okay, we're going to talk about what's nice about the day, what's positive in our lives, and we're not going to talk about the illness. Okay. The third thing is to see the chronic illness as something external to your marriage. It's important to recognize that the partner with the illness is not the illness. I hope you can get that. I hope you understand that. Excuse me, I'm getting some messages up here. Oh no. Coming up on my screen, reminding me that I'm supposed to be on Stronger Together tonight. So let me come back. There's so much more to your spouse than their illness. And seeing the illness as something external to your marriage unites you in relationship to the disorder and then becomes something to be tackled together. The next point is to determine if and when professional caregiving is needed. This is a hard one. There may come a time when symptoms become so severe that care needs to be shifted to someone else, to a professional perhaps. It's not always possible or practical for the well spouse to provide caregiving for the ill partner, maybe because of your own health. Both spouses need to realize that sustaining intimacy depends on establishing realistic caregiving boundaries. One of the things Cindy was fearful of was that she would get so bad that I would have to put her in a nursing home, a long-term care facility. And the only promise I made to her in that regard was, I will do everything I can to take care of you and keep you at home unless it becomes a danger to my own health or I can't give you the best care. And I know there were a couple of times when she was in the hospital and she was there with pneumonia. She'd been worn down. She was in there for like 10 days. She was very weak, and they wanted to send her to a rehab center. And because she had a trach and had to be on a ventilator at night because of her sleep apnea, there was only one rehab place she could go to, and that was a rehab hospital in about an hour away from us. And so a couple of times they wanted to send her home from the hospital or send her to that rehab, and she did not want to go, and I knew she didn't want to go. And so after twice staying, and the second time was not a very nice stay, when they recommended it again, she said she didn't want to go, and I stepped in and I said, she's not going. I take care of her at home. We'll bring her home. And it was one of those times where I recognized I could give her better care than going someplace else. But you may not be there yet, but if you are, this is just one of the things to kind of keep in mind to determine if and when professional caregiving might be needed. And some of these boundaries, for instance, providing some of the personal care for your spouse. Maybe that's done by a professional, but you're able to continue to be a and it could be done at home, and you may be able to continue to be a very vital part of their relationship. Okay. So let's go to the next one. Pursue time apart. This may seem, in opposition to everything I'm talking about in terms of building a marriage, a stronger marriage together. But it's not always easy to strike the proper balance between togetherness and separateness when you're dealing with a chronic illness, depending on the severity of it. But it's crucial to the health of any marriage. Both spouses need time away on a regular basis to get refreshed. For the caregiving spouse, something that I learned was that if I was going to be a healthy, good caregiver, I needed some self-care. That is, I needed to just take some time to do some things on my own, to have somebody else come in when Cindy was pretty much able to take care of herself and just needed to have somebody there in case of an emergency. That somebody would come, a friend come and visit with her, and I would go and do some things on my own, run some errands, or maybe just go get a cup of coffee or meet with a friend. And that's called self-care. And she would need some time away from me as well and interacting with some other people. So time away could take the form of visiting with family or friends. Even if you do that together, that can be helpful. Seeing a movie, going shopping or fishing, or merely sitting in a coffee shop with a good book and a cup of coffee can be helpful. So setting some boundaries so that the chronic illness doesn't consume you, that you're able to remain healthy in dealing with that. So maintain healthy boundaries. All right, so 3 things that you must do. Communicate. Second thing, view my problem as our problem. And then maintain healthy boundaries. Trying to improve your marriage can be overwhelming if you try to do too much at one time. So I've given you a bunch of stuff here tonight that, I suggest take your time, kind of digest it, talk about it with each other. And I think a good starting point might be to go back and look at those 3 questions under the communicate section. And at a time when you're not rushed, at a time when you can really engage each other and you're doing well, you're feeling good, to begin with one of those questions and to go back and forth and answer it, and see how the Lord might lead you in perhaps getting even deeper into the conversation of how the chronic illness is impacting your marriage relationship and how you can improve it. I want you always to be thinking about not just identifying what the issues are or what the problem is, but then how can we improve it? How can we get beyond it? And you might want to consider going to my website again, williebatson.com, and clicking on the online course tab and going and looking at the videos that I did with the Monadnock Bible Conference Center, the Wednesdays with Willie. We did 10 sessions and finished up a couple of weeks ago. And there's stuff there about communication. There's stuff there about stress. There's a lot of practical things there that relate to what I've been talking about here tonight. So that may be, if you weren't a part of that, that may be something that you might consider looking at it sometime. Okay. So let me I think I'm pretty much done here. Just one thing I want to mention, and then I'll take some questions. We've got some time, so I keep looking at my clock there. Take some time for some questions if you have them. I do have a couple of books. Some of you may be aware of that I have a couple of books that I have written. And I would just encourage you to go to williebatson.com/shop and check out the 2 books, Tools for a Great Marriage, and then the couples devotional book, Tools for a Great Marriage Devotional. You can order them from the website, which essentially links you to Amazon. If you want to go directly to Amazon and look up the titles, you can order the books from there. And especially the devotional book, I think that might be something. It's designed to be a devotional done once a week, 52 devotional dates for building a great marriage. And this might work well for you in terms of developing your spiritual intimacy and also talking about some things related to your marriage. And it also has built into it praying for each other and praying for your marriage. So I commend those books to you. Okay. All right. So let me go back here to the comments and see what we have from some of the comments. So what I'm seeing, Lori, both of you are ill, and you fortunately have different skill sets and limitations. And it's interesting, I guess I can assume from you saying fortunately, is that you complement each other. I don't know if that's what you mean, but I think that if that's what you mean, then that, one can help with something the other one cannot do, which is usually the way it goes, I think, in a marriage relationship, even if there's not a chronic illness. We each have different strengths. And then, Lori, you mentioned that your spouse had to go into a group home. And so I'm sorry about that, but those are kind of the way things have to happen depending on what the chronic illness is. And those are tough decisions, aren't they? Tough decisions to make. I know I had to make some tough decisions about Cindy being hospitalized. There were times when she would get an infection and it would affect her mentally. She would be imagining things. She would just not be in her right mind. And I would have to say, well, we need to go to the hospital. And as that frequently, the more it happened, the more I became aware of the subtle things that were happening so I could, encourage her to go to the hospital. And there were times when she was like, I'm not going to the hospital. And I hated to I had to kind of make her go, be very strong, and she would be very upset with me. But get her to the emergency room, and sure enough, she had pneumonia. Sure enough, she was getting worse, and they would say, it's a good thing you got her in here when you did. I think one time I waited a little bit too long, and once she got better, and I told her everything happened, she said, well, don't wait so long the next time. I said, well, you were giving me such a hard time. Just don't give me a hard time. Don't argue with me the next time. And maybe that'll be, maybe it'll work out. Those are tough decisions. So Lori Joy, yes, different strengths. So I see that there. Yeah, so I was right. All right. If there are no other comments or questions, I'm about ready to wrap this up. I really don't have anything else to share with you guys tonight. I want to thank you for being a part of this. I recognize several of you as being in here for all of these, for all four of these. And just want to encourage you that, again, excuse me, these are recorded. And I'm looking there's something else I want to put across the bottom here. These are recorded. They're available on my website. And if you know someone who could benefit from it, share it. When the video is live on Facebook or YouTube, you can share from those platforms to let people know that you watched these videos and perhaps encourage them. I really would like to see us spread the word, get this around. This is a unique ministry, a unique opportunity for couples. There's not a lot of this being offered in the United States. And I would like to be able to get this around as much as possible. So thank you for anything you can do to help out. And you have my contact information there. And I hope you have the handout as well. I love what I put on the bottom of the handout, something that came from another, I got it from another website. It's originally by Richard Bach, where it says, I'm here not because I am supposed to be here or because I'm trapped here, but because I'd rather be with you than anywhere else in the world. I think that's a good place, a good way to end. Let me pray with you, and then I'll say goodbye. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this evening that we've shared together, for this session, for all 4 of the Stronger Together video sessions that we've been able to do. I thank you for those couples who have watched and just pray that you will guide and direct them, help them, Father, to build a stronger marriage together, to be able to deal with the disappointments and discouragement and challenges, to be able to deal with those times with strength and with grace, especially with your help. For anyone who needs to depend more on you and reach out more to you, I pray that you would make yourself known to them as they call out to you, as they pray, that they would sense your peace, even in the storm that they might find themselves in. I pray that there will be healing of relationships as well as good health that will come for the one who has the illness as well as the one who is the care partner. And Father, may you protect these marriages from the enemy, from the devil that would want to destroy all the good that you are doing. May you continue to bless us with your grace and with your mercy. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, everybody, thank you very much for watching. And I look forward to the next time that we are able to gather together online. May God's blessing be upon you, grace and mercy to you all. Good night.